Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 99, wear sunscreen.
Today, I just felt like putting that. We're going to be talking about sunscreen. That's an old track from when I was growing up that no one probably recognises. Maybe you guys recognise that. Do you remember this track? It's an amazing bit of music. We'll put a link to it later. It's a thing called the Welcome to the Class of 99, something like that. Anyway, it opens with talking about wearing sunscreen. We're going to be talking a little bit about sunscreen, which is a roundabout way of introducing Caroline, Farah and Kelly Riley. Thank you, guys. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little about who you are, where you're from, and then we're going to dive straight into the problem space as we always do.
Hi, I'm Caroline.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-founders of Solmates Australia. And we recently launched a refillable sunscreen applicator, which is all about reducing plastic waste in your sun care habits. So basically, you've got an applicator. The ideal is that you buy your sunscreen in bulk and fill and refill it again.
Beautiful. And you just said Solmates Australia, but I'm talking to you at 7 o'clock at night, my time, but at 10 o'clock in the morning, your time. Where are you guys?
Well, I'm in London. We moved here about 5.5 years ago from Sydney. But Kel, you're...
Yeah, I'm in Sydney. Yes, we're always on opposite ends. So one of us is generally always wearing our pajamas whenever we speak to each other.
It must be incredibly challenging to manage. All right. Well, look, we will get to sunscreen and we will get to the product, even just some of the highlights there. And so I do want to come back to that. But I kind of want to get to a conversation today around the nature of disposable products and convenience as opposed to reusable. Sunscreen's a category that, especially if growing up in Australia, everyone's close to, like everyone has sunscreen where they are. And I want to understand how we arrived in a position where this has become a disposable, convenient product that you buy a small amount of, you keep it in the bag and then throw it away. How have we arrived there? Why is that the status quo, do you guys think, in your observation or understanding of the market?
I think it comes from a broader look at plastic, and single-use plastic. And I think single-use plastic has become so ubiquitous over the years because it's very convenient. The disposability of plastic is what makes it convenient. And I think sunscreen bottles is just one example of that. And I've been guilty of it in the past. I've got 2 children. We have a busy life where it just seems to be easier to buy small plastic bottles and put them in your bag or in their school bag. And then you forget about them, you buy some more. So I think from that point of view, the disposability is the convenience. And then you add on the sunscreen industry and the particulars around that and the restrictions about how you can package and use and store sunscreen. What do you think, Kel?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is very much just ease, right? That the problem comes from, because it is so much easier and that's what's available for you to use. So there really aren't many choices other than that.
And I don't want to go into this choice thing because this is a lot of what this show talks about, which is why is the status quo the way that it is? And some of this sounds like it's driven by customers. Okay, well, there's a convenience factor to it, and that's explained a whole lot of plastic. Just about everything you buy from the supermarket comes in plastic, I think for the same reason, freshness and convenience, whatever that is. But something else that you just touched on then a second ago, Caroline, was relating to this idea of there's a whole bunch of restrictions and obligations given the nature of the product itself. And so I want to understand that a little bit more, because I think this is kind of at the nub of this particular example of the problem of plastics and convenience.
Yeah, you're right. So sunscreen is classed as a pharmaceutical. So there is a lot of restrictions around what it actually can be housed in. So that is an issue that we have at the moment. So when you buy sunscreen, it comes generally in virgin plastic,
right?
Because that's something that's not going to affect the chemical balance of the sunscreen. It's not going to degrade it in any way. So generally does. There are sunscreens out there that are coming in different packaging. So you can see them in stainless steel now, things like that, but they are very much emerging. So for us, it is an issue that we have. So we have to draw quite a firm line around sunscreen being stored in plastic. So when you buy it, it's stored in plastic and that's what it's sold in. Our applicator is very much about kind of decanting from that original package into ours to transport it conveniently and apply it conveniently as well. So yeah, it is something that we have to draw that line on.
And we do have very clear sort of guidelines and instructions around how to use the applicator. We talk a lot about regular cleaning of it. Don't store your sunscreen in there for too long, because we want to make sure that we're following the regulations and the safety as closely as possible.
Yeah. And I want to come into this because weirdly enough, I've actually had some exposure to understanding this challenge specifically in the context of sunscreen through a conversation I had 2 years ago. And I actually asked a question of this said person, why aren't you just using recycled plastics? And he said, well, it's all too hard because the regulatory environment requires you to do it. And it tipped something off in me, this idea that we have a set of regulations that are intended to cause a benefit in some respect, but they're causing a detriment in another respect. And it's up now to an entrepreneur or a group of entrepreneurs in this case to try to work out how to get to circumvent this well-intentioned regulation. Not to suggest that you shouldn't operate within the space of the regulation, but my guess is that sunscreen needs to be in this virgin plastic, but hair conditioner doesn't or shampoo doesn't. And these are all things that you put on your body and apply, and they have a chemical balance that you need to do a certain thing to. And it's the stroke of a pen that says one is and one isn't. Am I kind of understanding that correctly?
Yeah. In a way you kind of are, really, because there are sunscreens out there, there are cosmetics out there with an SPF in it. So say, for example, you could say a facial moisturizer with an SPF of 50. That is not a sunscreen because it's a facial moisturizer, even though it creates that SPF. That is not quite as regulated about the packaging as the actual sunscreen, if that makes sense. So it is a very difficult area. And I think it is an area that I guess would be great if it could be looked at a bit more, because we do need to move forward in our sustainability options for everything. But yeah, at the moment, we are in that area where there are guidelines, the TGA guidelines, there are rules, and we need to comply with those, and which we are, but we have, obviously tried to circumvent.
Well, you've got to find a pathway around it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think the problem we're trying to solve is we wanted it to be more immediate than that. Yeah, we wanted a solution that people could use now. And that's why we very clearly created the applicator. But the point of the applicator is that you can use your own favorite sunscreen in it. So not only does that add to the convenience, but it adds to this idea that we can immediately help you solve that plastic problem in your sun care habit. But it's definitely something that Kel and I have looked at and talked about extensively, and is sort of is in our book to work towards potentially in the future.
Yeah. And look, there's a couple of parts to this that I want to drill into a little bit. There's something interesting that you just said, that was the idea that you have a consumer who is already consuming a bunch of stuff and says, I really do not want all these little things, and then have to throw them away. I've actually got a sunscreen that someone gave me at a festival about 5 years ago, and it's the perfect size to have at a festival. If you can see the video and you can't, but I've got a fairly shiny head. It's really important for me to have sunscreen up there. And if you're out for 4 hours at a festival, even more. But it's completely unrefillable. I would love to be able to keep using this thing purely for the convenience of it. And they obviously want me to go back and spend $7.95 to buy this thing again. And so I think you do have this situation where, and sunscreen is the example here, but I think there's a whole bunch more categories where this exists, where the behavior of the customer is absolutely, I would love to be able to not have to go and buy this thing 100 times.
Yeah.
You're not giving me any options. You're not making this possible for me. And so that was an interesting idea or a point that you just made, which I just want to drill into, which was you're meeting the customer where they are rather than trying to get them to change an entire set of behaviors. How did that come about? Did you sort of think, hey, we're going to build the whole thing, and then everyone said, no, just make it possible for me to take it on the road? Or was that, just tell me how that sort of played out.
So really, to be honest, we didn't really start with the idea of trying to solve anything really big. The idea itself came about actually from this very silly story, actually. I was in an airport with a very grumpy toddler and a very grumpy 5-year-old, and I was trying to get snacks out of my bag. And I always try to be as sustainable as I can in my choices. So I'm always carrying around this gigantic bulk sunscreen, purely pale English skin. So I'm always slathering myself in it and my kids. And going into my bag in trying to get snacks out, I realized that this container had literally just leaked all over my bag all the way through. And I thought, surely there's something that we could do, that something little that I could carry sunscreen around in, but still be able to buy my sunscreen in bulk. So really, it didn't come from any major, anything. It just came from this problem that I had. And then I'm speaking to Caroline. She was like, yeah, it's such a pain. We're always carrying these things around, lugging them down the beach. So yeah, it really came from that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kel misses out the point. Sorry. I was just going to say, Kel misses out the point of the story where how many times do you just complain about something and then just move on? But Kel does this weird little sketch of a applicator and takes it to a design agency and then just gets it made. It's such a wonderful way to start a business where neither of us had any clue about how to do any of this.
Hold on. Were you guys in business to do something that hadn't worked out what it was at that point? Or she just said, I've started a business. I don't know how to do half this stuff, so I need someone to do the other half. Is that kind of how that...
The second option.
Pretty much, that's exactly what it was. So yeah, Caroline's right. So I literally took a scribble on a piece of paper, and this amazing design agency in Sydney, Convert, turned it into something very cool. And I started making or working towards molds and things like that. And then I realized I've got no idea how to sell anything or market anything. It's not my skill set. Caroline and I have been friends for a very long time. So in speaking to her, we decided to pool our skills and try and make the thing work.
And just for going down that for 1 second, I've got obviously just because you just said it, I've got a sense of Caroline's skills in marketing, but just what's the division of labor? What's the respective skill set for you guys?
Oh my God, it's actually so perfect. Cal is very good at all detail and all products and all the ways that you need to run a business, whereas that is definitely not my skill set. So I've sort of always been in brand and marketing and product marketing. So it is a very clear decision, a difference in skills, which has actually worked really well. We've been quite lucky.
Yeah. The reason why I bring it up is I think I've actually got this is going to sound weird, but I've got a bottle of chili sauce in the fridge, and it's the best bottle of chili sauce I've had, but it doesn't say chili sauce on the label. It says chili sauce, and it says it's really hot, and it's not. And if you have hot sauce and you get a bottle of thing that says it's really hot and it's not, you're fully disappointed. And for me, it's the perfect description of product versus marketing. This is literally the best sweet chili sauce on the market, but it's not calling itself that. And there's a massive disconnect between the two. And you almost can't have a successful behavior change unless people understand what the thing's going to do for them, and then it actually delivers on that promise.
Yeah.
You started with the product first. How did that kind of translate into a go-to-market or a thought about how this thing needs to be positioned and marketed? I don't really like that word, but marketed.
I think it was an evolution, wasn't it, Cal? So I think Cal had this amazing focus on the product itself and the convenience of it. So when it was designed, it was very much what would be the best for the consumer. And I think where I came on board and where my focus was at the time, and obviously still is this idea of if you're going to make something, make it as sustainable as possible. Mm. And it just sort of flowed from there, didn't it, Kel? This idea of combining the convenience and the sustainability just became really easy to message because it was sort of built into the business. Yeah, I suppose that's how it all started, wasn't it?
Mm.
I want to use that as a short segue. I want to come back to something else as well, sort of related to the actual physicality of the product. But just in terms of this idea of kind of this message of sustainability, I'm trying to work out how to say this. Sometimes you can lead with a strong marketing message, but then you have to back it up. I'm glad you're nodding here because I think this is where I'm probably going to go with this. And so you paint yourself not into a corner, but you set yourself a high bar to say we need to work out how to be as absolutely sustainable as possible. And then you have to figure it out. I want to understand some of these kind of positions / decisions that you've had to make or are still making around the high bar for sustainability you're setting yourself more broadly, not just for the product and the impact it can have on not disposing of the plastic, and maybe some of the challenges that you've faced in trying to bring those to life or make them real?
Oh my God. Maybe I could start that off, Kel, because it's...
Yeah.
Too early.
I think because... I think even though I'm in marketing, I think Kel and I are very honest people. So we don't want to lie or fib or just make up stuff, even in marketing, which I think people tend to do. And there
sure.
is...
Or are
the
definitely known to do.
Yeah. And the term greenwashing is a beautiful example of that. So I think when we say we're trying to do something, then we absolutely really mean it. But we also want to say we're not perfect yet. There's things in our supply chain that we're still working on that we are moving towards being even more sustainable. So I think as long as we talk about it honestly, that's sort of where we're coming from with that. And in terms of the challenges, I mean, Kel, you'd be able to talk about that much better.
Yeah, definitely. So lots of challenges. So you're right. We did set the bar quite high. And I guess the material that we used for the product itself was a challenge to get. We wanted to be very particular about making sure that it was sustainable as possible. So we were very lucky in that we work with this awesome manufacturer in the northern beaches of Sydney, actually, called Masterplast. And they were fantastic in helping us source that material, but it's really not easy to get. So we use recycled ocean-bound plastic, which is actually food grade. So it's used for lunch boxes and things like that. And that was quite difficult to source. And we were very lucky in getting our manufacturer. Well, he's amazing in actually sourcing that for us. And then I guess the other difficulty is we want to make sure all our packaging is made with 100% recycled material as much as possible. And that is actually really difficult to come across in the size, like different sizes that we need and different things that we need. So it's actually been quite a challenge to find some of that and make sure our supply chain is robust in that we don't just have one supplier, and if something happens to them, then, we're stuck. So trying to find an actual robust supply chain.
This is all that detail that you were talking about, Caroline,
yes.
before.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. I'll stop now.
I'm definitely seeing the yin and the yang here. This is absolutely the detail I love. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denigrating the detatal.
It's the detail I love as long as Kel looks at it.
Sorry, I could go on for hours, so I'll just stop there.
I actually want to keep going, but I do want to just check one thing, which was you talked about the need to use virgin plastic, but then you said that you are able to use recycled plastics because it's of a food grade. There's some kind of Venn diagram that has a very small overlap that you thread the needle on there. Is that what's happened?
Yeah, because we were taught before about the kind of delineation between storage of sunscreen, transport of sunscreen. That's where that comes in. So because we are not storing sunscreen, and when you buy an applicator, Solmate, it's empty. And as we said, we've got quite, strict terms and conditions about cleaning it regularly, not keeping it in there for long periods of time. Sure. It's not for storage. It's literally just for filling up, taking down the beach or wherever. Yeah. And because of that, because we're not storing sunscreen and we're not selling sunscreen, then rules around materials that you can use are different. However, we did go with the food grade purely because of the fact that we wanted to make sure that nothing contaminated the sunscreen in there. So, and that's purely a choice thing. It's not not
an obligation.
Yeah.
So getting back to the detail, because I think there's an arc of sustainability, right? So I'm in an online finance business in my other kind of life, and we don't have any physical thing, right? So when we think about, well, how do we reduce our impact? So many of the things that you would normally have to take into account just don't exist for us. But there are a whole bunch of kind of scope 2 or secondary things. I'm trying to understand as a brand, especially at the stage that you're at, which is relatively speaking, fairly early stage, you're fairly new in market. Like how far do you try to take that and how deep do you need to go? And like where do the diminishing returns start to take you away from, if you could take 100 million sunscreen bottles out, that would actually be a bigger lever than focusing on this last 0.5%. I'm just curious about how you think about that and some of your decision making around that.
I think our decision making, what we find is that we always want to focus on the quality of the product, yeah? And that sometimes clashes with the sustainability. So there's often a balance about how do we make sure we have a really beautiful, long-lasting product that is as sustainable as possible. So the decisions around that, I think, are pretty important. And we're never going to I think it's always going to be a balance. So there's only so far we're going to take that, is what I'm saying.
Right.
But there's also other ways we're trying to pull some levers. So we do a monthly donation to an organization which cleans up ocean-bound plastic as well. So we try and sort of offset what we're continuing to do with support of them. We try and carbon offset through a nonprofit in Australia. So there's just different levers we think we can pull with the product that we're making, while still understanding that we're in the business to make a really beautiful, durable, long-lasting product that people want to buy and people want to show off.
Yeah. I like that last point. That's definitely the marketer. Not to take us away from marketing, but I want to talk a little bit about economics, because it's something that I think is the harsh reality of anything that we're doing, but also it's the great enabler, right? In a lot of respects, if you can find something that does have economics that work, you can do more of that thing in the world that we live in. So I want to understand a little bit more about the economics of the product. And I don't necessarily mean how much it costs to buy, although that's a factor. I'm trying to understand when someone changes to using larger amounts of sunscreen stored in virgin plastics and then using an applicator that they might have 3 or 4 of, how are their economics looking and why do those economics look better? And then how does that work for you guys as well?
I think for the consumer, it is a lot more economical than buying the small single-use plastic roll-on applicators. So buying in big bulk generally is a lot more cost-effective for them, and then being able to fill up in our little applicator and take those down the beach, give them to the kids. Because I don't know about you guys, but before all of this, I would have like 100 of those little single-use plastic
from the festival.
Yes, in my car, in the bottom of my bag, kids' school bags everywhere. Just being able to buy one big bulk bottle to last you however long, depending on your family, I guess, dynamics, and then being able to just refill them. Because we've got a really durable product, the Solmates itself should last for a really long time. They're really hard wearing. So yeah, from a customer point of view, we think the economics are really good.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I don't want to lead with that. That's not the motivation necessarily for people to buy it, but it is a ticket to the party, right?
Yeah.
Often, I had a great chat to a large national solar installer a few years ago, not on the show, but just more generally. And I was trying to understand the dynamic around why someone would get solar. And I said, is it because they want to do X and improve the world? And he's like, not really. And I said, is it because to save money? He said, sometimes that's a factor. And he said, what really motivates people is that they want to be able to run their stuff whenever they want to run it and not feel bad. They want that feeling on a day-to-day basis, and that's why they put it in, because then it doesn't matter if they leave the lights on all the time because the electricity was free anyway. In fact, it makes the thing pay off faster. And I think there's a certain amount of kind of being able to live freely and with agency with the convenience that you're used to expecting without feeling like, I'm throwing away these things every 5 seconds. But I do think customers will rarely make that choice if it has a large economic impact on them, a negative one in that respect. And so I think about what like ZeroCo are doing, who we have had on the show, talking about reusing plastic. And they do something quite interesting in their economic model for the customer. They just say, here's our price and here's all the costs that go into it and here's our margin. And they're incredibly transparent about that. And they basically say the thing that you buy on the shelf in insert brand name of supermarket here, 48% of that is the margin that from being on that shelf, and you just don't have to pay that with us. So you get more of a product for the same or for a lower price. So I sort of believe ultimately that customers will leverage that information in some of their decision making. Coming back to your own economics though, you're selling a product that you need a few of, maybe 100, depending on who you are. But to your words exactly, they're very durable. They're highly durable, I think was the word you used. How do you build a longer term sustainable business model selling a thing that you'll probably only sell once? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Cal and I talk about all the time as when you look at our economic. But I think, what we found is it was quite surprising to us how many people buy at once. We very rarely get one a consumer buying one. So I think you're already helping the economics when you're buying 3 or 4 at a time. Your basket size just increases. I think that's definitely helped us. And plus, there's a pretty big market out there. We've already started shipping to the US. We started that a couple of weeks ago. So I think the scale is going to come through just a broader market, as well as thinking that people will need a few.
Yeah.
That's what we hope.
Yeah. Well, you'll find it in due course. Before jumping on the call, I was thinking about parallel, not businesses, but just other people who were rethinking some of the kind of structure of the way these things work. And I actually quote these guys a fair bit. I haven't interviewed them, I probably should, but the who gives a crap model is interesting because what I think they've done is they've taken a thing that we used to buy from a shopping centre or from in the supermarket and made it something that we buy frequently in bulk from them directly. And toilet paper is a great example of that. And I kind of look at sunscreen and say, while some people are going to have their preferred sunscreen and they're going to want to buy that, happy days. A bunch of people are going to be like, if you can give me a high quality government approved thing in a box that outputs the exact amount to fill up one of those applicators, then that's my subscription for the year and I only need to buy it once every 12 months. And it's designed to go with the thing that I'm taking out and putting into the school bag. I feel like that's a natural evolution of what you're doing. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah. And that's definitely something Kel and I've looked at and thought about.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right. It might be a natural evolution, although we haven't quite decided on that yet.
Oh, I think the market decide.
Let the market decide. And one thing that we want to drive our future decisions is how do we create something that's actually needed rather than just adding to the market?
Sure.
So do we want to create one more sunscreen to put out in the market? What is that? What is the value in that for us, the consumer and the planet? So I think those are the questions that we're going to ask as we progress, hopefully.
Yeah, I think I'm probably thinking about it more at how would you complement the convenience with the thing that needs to fill it up to make it convenient.
100%.
And a lot of the time, this interview hasn't gone out yet, but it probably will have by the time this interview goes out. So anyway, I'll talk about myself in the future past tense, if that makes sense.
Cross promotion.
But I spoke to Sherry Van Stone about they're basically trying to build a large platform for measuring impact for research and funding grants. But what they realised was they have to build the market. They have to actually go and help these people find the grants that are already available before they can measure the data to measure all the impact they're having. And so quite often, if you want to impact this large thing, you kind of need to start with the enabler and what's the enabler. I think the applicator for sure is the enabler. So I love it on that level. But it will be interesting to see how that kind of evolves from your customers.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Coming back just a little bit, if this goes from one household to 1,000 to 100,000 to 100 million, I'm always interested in, and this has shaped the system question generally, who does it impact? Like other than the customers who are like, this is heaps better, who stands to lose? I don't really like that, but who's displaced from this innovation?
We also don't like to talk about losers, but I think to start with, it's the sunscreen businesses and brands who create the small single-use plastic sunscreen bottles and who profit off that. And I think what we would like to see is the system changes where those businesses don't create those and focus more on creating bulk sunscreen options that are still quality but not excessively expensive. So I suppose that's where we're coming to from that. And then also people who don't include sustainability in their business propositions moving forward. So what we'd really like to be a part of is this conversation or the way we change the way people view convenience and disposability and sustainability. So how do we make it that other businesses don't have that option anymore to ignore it, I think. What do you think, Kel?
I'm smiling and laughing there because I'm thinking about the kind of elevation to this idea of a Solmates approved, where you say there's 20 sunscreens out there. These ones sell in bulk. They sell a great product. It's designed to work nicely with a Solmates applicator as an example. And they're part of the conversation. They're trying to reduce their plastic. They realise that convenience is a thing their customers want, but they're ultimately buying a brand product that is, hey, I like this thing, I like the way it feels, whatever that is. It's just an interesting idea that instead of coming into a market, and you kind of hinted at it before, Caroline, to displace what's there, it's about saying, how do we improve the delivery of what's there already?
Yes.
I know you guys are focused on sunscreen. I'm not trying to change that, but do you look at any other categories and think there's 5 other categories that honestly could borrow from this playbook and change the convenience and flip that model around?
it is interesting that we've had a lot of customer feedback about what they actually use the applicators for. A lot of people talk about just standard moisturizers, eczema cream. Mosquito repellent is one that comes up a lot. So it's been wonderful to hear, and sort of it's opened our eyes on, there's lots of different options. We travel quite a bit from London when we go away for not too long a period, and I like to take my moisturizer in the Solmate just because it's easier. So I think there's lots of different ways of looking at it as a refillable applicator for many different purposes.
Yeah. And I mean, broadening that though to categories that we do want the convenience of, but at the moment, the way that we're doing convenient is actually very unsustainable. So the applicator specifically, things that look like sunscreen and probably are applied the same way as sunscreen. But I was thinking about other categories that might benefit from this idea of helping a brand who has a great product with the last mile of delivery, which is kind of how I think about this.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting proposition that we probably can talk to you about offline. And ideas. Look at that. New business. New business.
You're more than busy enough with your applicators across all the categories that look like sunscreen, I have no doubt. I reckon in a year from now, you'll be toying with the idea of white labeling a sunscreen that plays nicely with your own thing. You don't have to make it, but you can at least be approved and made by the people that you like.
Oh, Vince, and that's already, we've been having those conversations.
Well down those paths. I think sunscreen for me feels like a substitutable good rather than it's Coca-Cola and it can only be Coca-Cola in my opinion. The sunscreen itself I'm referring to there, obviously. Just in terms of where you're up to, where are you guys at? I know I've seen the kind of the product launch, what feels like a few months ago, but I can't work out with COVID anymore how long that's been. I'm just trying to understand where you are in the arc of the story and also what the road ahead looks like in terms of where to from here.
Yeah, I guess we're still pretty new. We did launch in late October last year and we had great traction, I guess, for spring and summer in the Australian market. And as Caroline said before, we just launched in the US. We wanted to choose an overseas market that was a little bit familiar and we thought has quite a lot of similarities, with Australia. So, lots of sunshine, things like that. So we've just started to get slight amount of traction there. Could
so
be
you're talking
more.
about America, not England, by the way.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Everyone's confused about the sunshine in England.
Yes,
that did hear that. That's true.
It did happen once for a few days. So yes, sorry. So the US and so I guess from here, we'd love to get more traction in the US. We'd love to expand to different countries, one of them being the UK. We will definitely get there. And others around the world as well.
And it's the kind of the nature of the product that it, obviously you can go to the website and buy it, but that's every product. But realistically, to get to scale where millions of people are not using disposable plastics in this context, is it about working out how to get it into a traditional retailer as well? Or is that kind of the avenue? How does that play out?
Yeah. I mean, Kel and I made a really just deliberate decision from launch we even sort of saw it as a trial or a pilot last summer where we had complete control over those channels because we just wanted to make sure that everything was working as it should. And we've had it's already in some independent stores around Australia that have come to us. And we've actually had a chat to some bigger sort of chains. And we have wanted to tread carefully and slowly. But yes, I think at scale, we would be looking at bigger traditional retailers to achieve that impact. I think you're right. Yeah.
And obviously it's fairly early, but it represents an opportunity for them to be further ahead in some of this stuff that they're trying to do as well, just to take disposable plastics off their shelves, even if that means maybe selling a product that has less margin, which is a bulk product versus a small one. They're like, that's the nature of the shift in the consumer sentiment.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think it's just really fitting nicely into that family of reusable products, isn't it? Like coffee cups, water bottles, they're sort of ubiquitous now. And this does fit quite nicely in it. And we were just really surprised about how quickly the demand grew last Christmas. Caught us unawares, we sort of ran out of stock just in the week of Christmas, which was incredibly stressful. Don't ever try and reorder stock over Christmas.
Also trying to make it.
No, exactly. So it has been this it's been so lovely to see this immediate welcoming from consumers, considering we did try and start quite quietly and gently.
Yeah.
So we just sort of want to grow and accelerate from there. This summer is going to be a really interesting key time for us because we do want to jump up in scale. We're ready now, we think.
Yeah. And it's probably going to be a good segue to round out the show as well. Just it sounds like the product works, customers who have it like it. So you're at that kind of inflection point. It seems to be a trend here. We always seem to be talking to people just when they're on that inflection point, which I love. So we get to look back in a year and see you crushing, which is awesome. My question was going to be though, just in terms of kind of the things that are needed or are blocking or the challenge of the roadblocks to get to that next level of scale. What are those challenges for you guys?
I think firstly, Kel and I are still really new to this. So we're definitely learning as we go. So I think we're continually trying to bring people on board that can help us and sort of give us their expertise and grow that more robust network around us. I think that's key. And we're already looking at new product design. So we're looking at a sort of a bigger one and different size. And for that just involves...
Of course you are.
Yeah. That
involves... got bored. More details to operate in.
Don't want to be too, not busy. But so I think for us, it's how do we include new products, which involves a substantial amount of investment from us at scale. So it's sort of a scale plus network sort of thing. I don't know if it's anything you want to add to that, Cal.
No, I think pretty much it's, no, not really. Not really well, sorry. I can't add to more to that.
I guess the reason I'm asking is that if I think about things that are physical in nature or that involve some kind of material, and I'm thinking back to Great Wrap, and you guys have probably come across Great Wrap in your travels, presumably.
Amazing. Yeah.
And they were like, we found this thing, we made this thing. And they're like, all right, we need to make it for people. All right, cool. We'll need to go and find $10 million and build a massive factory. I don't think that's the kind of capital investment that you're talking about here, but ultimately, if you have another Christmas like the one you had last year, there's a certain amount of reality that you physically have to have the product to be able to make that work. Are these some of the kind of challenges that you're saying network would be able to help you understand how to plan for and solve those problems, or is it more marketing or what?
I think there's a part of that. I think our production process, like our supply chain, we're continuing to build on. And Cal still packs all the orders in her house. Like when we reach scale, that is not possible for anyone. So
thank you, by the way, Kelly. I got mine. But it was in the other room freezing, and I was like, I'm not going to try to pick it up. It's cool. So I had got it, and I am about to transfer stuff into it.
There's big supply/production questions that we need to answer, and that also comes with a financial cost. Yeah, so it's balancing that. Kel and I have been very clear that we haven't sought additional investment yet, but we're constantly talking about if and when that happens so we can scale appropriately.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, and we don't talk a lot about capital and raising capital on this show, but I think it's an acknowledgement that at a certain level of scale, it's hard to get past over that hump without working out how you're going to fund that hump. There's inevitably a delay between capital that you need to spend and the outcome of that capital. Yeah. And if you don't do those things, then you're destined to be packing them for yourself. And that's obviously an impact on your parenting life or social life, but the bigger impact is that it doesn't allow you to have the impact that you ultimately want to have as well. So it becomes a very real conversation once you get to that inflection point. Yeah, I think not that you'll solve it on this particular call, but there's always a temptation to go with the thing that you've heard the most about, which is investors. And I think the maturity of the market now to consider other capital options that are either not dilutive or are looking at your revenue rather than your blue sky are absolutely available. I think, that's definitely a journey to go on and to go down a few rabbit holes. Investors are kind of for life. It can be quite challenging.
Yes. So we've heard.
Yes. They can work. I've had plenty of investors to be able to say that, but not always the best. Amazing, guys. Look, I'm really stoked to have caught you at this inflection point. Can't wait to actually use the product that you sent me. So thank you. It's about 7 degrees here in the Blue Mountains. So
you might have to wait a while.
Yeah. But yeah, look, it's going to be a pleasure to see this thing unfold, and I hope you have an amazing summer in America in terms of launch there and back here in Australia where it all comes together. And thank you again for being on the show.
That's amazing. Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for having us. It's great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.